All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Real Graps. This is our fifth edition this semester, I believe, here on WIUR Iona University Radio. I'm your host, Joe Gierer, and I apologize in advance if I might seem a little off. I might stutter some words. I don't really know how this show is going to go because I have a lot on my mind, and allergies have been kicking my butt for the past few days or so. So I'm doing my best. I'm trying. I still wanted to get here and do a show for you guys because we did have a very big week in pro wrestling and another big weekend coming up in the world of WWE. So, of course, I had to get in here, break it all down. And I'd be remiss to not start off this show with some breaking news. Unfortunately, this week, as I said, it was a big week in WWE. Not all big weeks are good weeks. And this week was unfortunately a terrible, disastrous week in terms of injuries to top stars. To start, one of the biggest headlines to come out of the week, Jacob Fatu, the Samoan werewolf, one of the biggest players on SmackDown and a potential future WWE champion, WWE championship contender or challenger at least. It seemed like that was the direction that creative was going to go with Jacob Fatu. Unfortunately, he is now out potentially into 2026 with a non-wrestling injury. It was confirmed to be a dental injury. He needs surgery done on his mouth. I'm not sure exactly what that surgery will be. And reports said that Jacob Fatu will be out for at least a month, according to his own words. So I don't know exactly how long Jacob will be out. He has to get some surgery done on his mouth. That's a very unfortunate and big loss, especially at the time of where we are in WWE, because Jacob Fatu was seemingly going into a championship feud with Cody Rhodes. He was feuding with Drew McIntyre. They were out for the championship, both of them. So there was a very real possibility that if this feud with Drew McIntyre did not continue, at least in the immediate future with Cody Rhodes, it was going to be Jacob Fatu that ended up challenging him for the championship eventually. And he and Cody would end up feuding with one another. So very unfortunate loss on SmackDown, especially when SmackDown is finally finding its footing again. A lot of people over the last few years, specifically the last year or so, have found SmackDown to be kind of stale, have found it to be kind of bland. They don't really feel like SmackDown is the A show. It's clearly Raw. Ever since Raw went to Netflix, everything has been going over to Raw, all the top stars. So SmackDown has been in kind of a purgatory where they are not really the top show, clearly. And some people even prefer NXT over them. And I think NXT is a very good show. But for a main roster show like SmackDown to be compared to NXT and eventually, like get to the point where NXT is preferred over it, that's kind of a problem. And SmackDown has been a wonderful show these last 2 weeks. I thought they've done an extremely good job of getting the show back where it needs to be. But unfortunately, when you lose a top guy like Fatu, it inevitably is going to take a blow. So clearly, over on Friday, as we'll get to eventually, they creatively pivoted away from whatever angle was going on with Jacob Fatu and wish him a speedy recovery. And hopefully he gets back soon, especially if he's going to be put into the picture for the biggest title in the entire company or potentially in the entire industry, because I don't think there's any bigger championship to hold in professional wrestling itself than the WWE Championship. That is the Alpha Championship of the Alpha brand. Therefore, it is the biggest title in the entire industry. Jacob Fatu, and hopefully you get well soon. Speaking of world titles, in the biggest industry or in the biggest company in the industry, Seth freaking Rollins, the leader of the Vision we saw last week, was turned on by Bronson Reed and Braun Breaker and Paul Heyman for that matter. Seth Rollins is gone. He is no longer the World Heavyweight Championship, or he is no longer the World Heavyweight Champion. He had to vacate it, and that is due to a shoulder injury. It was speculated last week. We talked about it here on the show. Seth Rollins, I believe during that coast-to-coast spot in the Crown Jewel Championship match with Cody Rhodes, he jumped from one turnbuckle to the other, went for a headbutt, landed hard on his left shoulder, and I believe that it is a shoulder injury that Seth Rollins is out with. He had to get under, at least according to Adam Pearce on Monday Night Raw, he underwent major surgery. And I believe, don't quote me on this, but he's expected to miss an extended period of time, somewhere between potentially 6 to 12 months, which would bring him back at the earliest in April around WrestleMania season, and at the latest obviously next October, a year from now. So, of course, Seth Rollins vacated the championship. I believe that's the reason why the division breakup was sped up was because of this injury. I don't think it was supposed to happen originally. That's what I said last week. That's what I still believe to this day. Seth freaking Rollins, of course, another top star. Not like Jacob Fatu, honestly, because Seth Rollins was a top one or two guy in the company this entire year. He's arguably the MVP of the entire year. And he was carrying he was carrying the world heavyweight championship at the time of his unfortunate injury at Crown Jewel, which is funny. It's a little funny, but it's not funny, but it's ironic, I guess, because his title reign started by faking an injury. His title reign eventually came to an end only a couple of months later due to a real injury. And Seth Rollins has not had himself a very fortunate time carrying the Money in the Bank briefcase, because what I just saw before this and what I didn't even recall when it happened is that Seth Rollins cashed in Money in the Bank in 2015 and Seth Rollins cashed in Money in the Bank in 2025. And 10 years apart from one another, both title reigns came to an unfortunate end because Seth Rollins got injured and was forced to vacate the championship. So 6 to 12 months, I believe, is the timetable for his recovery. Hopefully he gets well soon and comes back and interferes in whatever Vision story is going on at that time, because I'm sure that group will not be broken up completely by the time that he comes back. He has some unfinished business to handle with Braun Breaker, Bronson Reed, and of course, the Oracle, the wise man, Paul Heyman, who was eventually going to turn on him at some point. It just so happened that he did it earlier than people expected him to. And lastly, of course, I don't have an unknown timetable for recovery from this. I don't know the exact situation, but Rhea Ripley posted on social media in the past week that she has busted up her nose in Japan. WWE has been on their international tour in Australia. They went to Japan right after. And during that time in Japan, doing the shows over there, Rhea Ripley apparently broke her nose. It looked nasty, did not look good. She was not on Monday Night Raw last night, although she had traveled home. And Rhea Ripley, like I said, we don't really know what the timetable for her recovery will be, but hopefully if she's back sooner rather than later, whether it be a mask, I don't know what it be. But Rhea Ripley, Seth Rollins, and Jacob Fatu all injured and out in the same week is not necessarily the greatest time for WWE. But at the same time, I feel like WWE had a wonderful week. I felt like all shows were good. That going from NXT to Raw, SmackDown, all of them were top quality. They're one of the best quality they've been in a long time. And without further ado, we shall dive right in. Starting, of course, with NXT, as we do on this show, because it's the earliest show to happen before we get back on the microphone. It goes NXT, it goes Friday Night SmackDown, any PLE or pay-per-view that happens over the weekend, and then, of course, Monday Night Raw happens the night before I get back in here and talk to you on this microphone. NXT last Tuesday was the follow-up episode to NXT Showdown, which was NXT versus TNA. That was the basis of the show. Now, Halloween, of course, is coming up. And for the NXT champion, Ricky Saints, it appears that it is time for him to trick or treat. Hopefully for him, trick and treat, because Ricky Saints came out at the beginning of the show and, of course, was very angry and vocal about Trick Williams, the former TNA World Champion, walking out on him in the main event match of NXT Showdown in that Survivor Series Styles match. It was a 4-on-2. Trick Williams and Ricky Saints were left alone. Trick Williams got off the apron and just walked to the back. He abandoned the brand. He abandoned Ricky Saints. And Ricky did not take too kindly to that, therefore issuing a challenge for Trick Williams to face him for the NXT Championship at Halloween Havoc, which comes up this Saturday or Sunday. I can't remember the exact day, but it's over the weekend. I think it's on Saturday, I want to say. Could be Sunday. I'm not exactly sure, like I said. But Ricky Saints issued a challenge for Trick Williams. Of course, Trick Williams is going to love hearing that, especially after he just lost the TNA World Championship. But he had to keep Ricky guessing. He told him that he'll take it, but he wants it on his own time and terms, of course, because Trick Williams is the hot shot of NXT, of course, in his own mind. But in reality, too, he's like one of the biggest, if not the biggest star on that brand. Later on in the show, the two ran into each other backstage. Trick Williams laid out Ricky Saints, and of course, Ricky Saints and Trick Williams will be facing now for the Halloween Havoc PLE. They will be facing for the NXT Championship. It will become official this week, actually tonight, on NXT. It will become official as they sign the contract. And we all know how that goes. Trick Williams and Ricky Saints will brawl tonight during their segment, their contract signing on NXT, because when is there ever a clean contract signing, especially when you have a face versus a heel? Because when we had the contract signing for Crown Jewel in the final face off with Tiffany Stratton and Stephanie Vaquer on that SmackDown, um, Stephanie Vaquer and Tiffany still didn't even brawl with one another, obviously, because Tiffany is a face and Stephanie is a face. So why would they brawl? And that didn't even go according to plan because Kiana James and Julia had to stick their noses in and cause some issues. So contract signings in WWE are keyword for brawl. Trick Williams and Ricky Saints will have one tonight, which means they will have a fight and a brawl before that segment is over. Moving on, the youngest in WWE, in NXT, in TNA, the youngest meet the OGs. Obviously, you have the young OG Javon Evans. He was talking to Leon Slater in the backstage about their Bound for Glory title match that they had for TNA for the X Division Championship, going back and forth. They're clearly in a little on-screen. They're in a little on-screen bromance. They're kind of boys with one another, of course, because they're both the youngest. They're both of the same age. They're both phenomenal wrestlers. They picked up a tag team win together on NXT a couple of weeks back, but the Hardy Boys pulled up on them. They were talking about Goofy Dark State, of course, as Trick or as Javon put it. And the Hardy Boys are giving a rematch to Dark State at Halloween Havoc for the NXT Tag Team Championships. Both titles were on the line when they faced at Bound for Glory, that being Dark State and the Hardys. This time at Halloween Havoc, it is only the NXT Championships that are on the line, and I'm sure that's going to have some implications on it as to the result of the match and who wins. But the Hardys gave Javon and Leon Slater their stamp of approval. Obviously, they said they've taken Leon Slater under their wing. And Javon Evans is a fellow North Carolina boy, just like the Hardy Boys are. So that's why Dark State would have attacked them. Either way, the Hardys have their backs. They give them the stamp of approval. That's the future of the industry. Everyone knows it. It's no secret. But the Hardy Boys ended up getting dropped by Dark State backstage ahead of their Halloween Havoc match later in the evening. And as for Leon Slater, he will be defending his X Division Championship on TNA, on NXT television tonight. He'll be facing Stax Lorenzo, who has been nowhere to be found since winning the Heritage Cup Championship. It's not even been mentioned on TV. I don't know if they slowly or quietly did away with that championship because when Stax reappeared, he wasn't carrying it. I don't know if they'll mention him as the Heritage Cup champion tonight, but that championship is nowhere to be found. Stax wants another belt. He'll be getting a shot at Leon Slater's X Division Championship this coming NXT episode tonight, which I'm sure will be a good match. Stax is good. Leon Slater's incredible. So they're going to have themselves a wonderful match. No Grace Given is my headline for this because Jordan Grace and Kalani Jordan, of course, that is turning into its own little mini feud. TNA's Knockouts champion, Kalani Jordan, NXT talent, of course, was fighting for TNA last week in the Survivor Series Styles matches, and she wasn't all that thrilled with Jordan Grace's reffing during that matchup because she did have the NXT champion, JC Jane, I believe it was, dead to rights in the middle of the ring, and Jordan Grace was occupied outside. Didn't get the three. JC Jane was able to kick out, and Jordan did not take too kindly to Jordan Grace's shenanigans because going into that match, there was some doubt, some questions as to whether or not Jordan Grace would be impartial. She would call it down the middle. She thought she did. Kalani Jordan, of course, thought she didn't. They got into an argument backstage pre the battle royal that was to come up later on in that main event to determine JC Jane's challenger at Halloween Havoc, to which they were both going to be in, Jordan Grace and Kalani Jordan. So that you would imagine, carry over into the battle royal. Last week it was woo, 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 because Matt Cardona, formerly known as Zack Ryder, was coming back to WWE on NXT to have a match with Josh Briggs. And today it is boo, 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 because Josh Briggs kicked out of a radio silence, formerly called the Rough Rider, of course. That's Matt Cardona, Zack Ryder's finisher. He kicked out of one, and he ended up beating Matt Cardona in his return match to WWE with a big boot, which I don't see how a big boot in 2025 can be a wrestling finisher. I understand. I've heard Gunther talk about it. Josh Briggs is a big guy. Gunther does the same thing with himself. Just simply use those big limbs, use what's big to your disposal, make it realistic. And obviously, if somebody is running at you full force and getting a boot to the face in real life, it's going to do a lot of damage. But we've been conditioned as wrestling fans throughout the years to not exactly put too much stock into a big boot itself. So to have somebody like Matt Cardona fall victim to a simple big boot and that gets you the 3 count, it was a questionable decision on my end, on my opinion, of course. But Josh Briggs got himself a big win. He beat Matt Cardona in his return match to WWE, which I'd have to imagine was not received lightly by Matt Cardona, who's been fighting and clawing to get back with everything in him. Although he might have been on board with it and happy with it because he said that he's willing to do whatever it takes, be Zack Ryder again, whatever it is, to get back in. So I'm sure that on a baseline, he's very happy to get back in as his current persona as Matt Cardona. But I'd have to imagine that taking a loss to Josh Briggs in his debut match back was not entirely received too well by the former Intercontinental and United States and tag team champion, Zack Ryder, aka Matt Cardona. Now, the tag title contenders. There was a triple threat tag match for the number 1 contendership that was made last week for that night. It'd be Hank and Tank against Chase University against the Calling winners would face the winner of Dark State and Hardy Boys at Halloween Havoc. Now, they got blasted. They got blown up. That match went on for a little bit, and then OTM returned, who hasn't been seen in a while, and they completely wreaked havoc on the triple threat tag match. They laid out the entire field and got themselves booked in a match against Hank and Tank tonight, which I'm sure they're going to win to call their shot at the NXT Tag Team Championships. Now, out with the old and in with the new. Of course, last week it was revealed that Lady Reed was the one who helped JC Jane retain her championship against Lola Vice at No Mercy. And it was also Lady Reed who laid out and sent Jasmine Nix into her future endeavors away from the company and out of Fatal Influence. And of course, she got rewarded by Fatal Influence, Fallon Henley and JC Jane for that. And Lady Reed became an official member of Fatal Influence. So that faction, being a 2-person run, lasted all but 2 weeks. Didn't last very long. Lady Reed filled in as the third. And I think it's a very good booking decision and creative direction to get away from Jasmine Nix and get Lady Reed, who they've featured a lot on NXT this year, in the last few months especially, to get her into a bigger spot, into one of their main stables and factions in Fatal Influence. It's a good move, and I think it'll pay off very well for Lady Reed and for the faction, because the faction can't really function as a 2-person faction. There is no such thing as a 2-person faction. At that point, they're just a tag team. So in order to have a faction, you must have 3 or more. Lady Reed is in. She'll continue to help them win, and that will be that. There is an impending Day of the Dead coming up, that being the AAA Latin American champion, El Hijo de Dr. Wagner Jr. had his debut WWE match, not WWE match, I'm sorry, his debut NXT match. Last week, he faced Lexus Jester, Lexus King, whatever you want to call him, picked up that win, and right after it was booked, Ethan Page came out, told him he's getting a shot at the North American Championship, but of course, Dr. Wagner was well ahead of him and got a Day of the Dead match booked at Halloween Havoc for the North American Championship, which is essentially another way to say anything goes. Day of the Dead, of course, for Halloween, but this match will have absolutely everything. I'm sure it'll have kendo sticks, it'll have tables, it'll have some things that are tossed in for Halloween, whether that be, I don't know, could use pumpkins. I'm sure you're going to see a pumpkin somewhere during that match. But Ethan Page versus Dr. Wagner, El Hijo de Dr. Wagner Jr., of course, the the AAA Latin American champion. They'll face off for the North American Championship this Saturday or Sunday, of course. I don't know the day, like I said, for the North American Championship. Will Ethan Page remain the greatest North American to ever live, to grace the earth on Saturday? We will get there eventually. We've been on this roller coaster ride for the last few weeks or month or so, where Zarya, of course, was upset that Sol was in the Battle Royal. Sol Ruka was in the Battle Royal. She revealed. And she's chasing more championships instead of being in Zarya's corner. Zarya had an upcoming match that night against Blake Monroe, who started some beef with the Zaruka tag team and stable. Eventually, Sol Ruka came out to help Zarya, and she stole a chair from Blake. But initially, that just caused a distraction, and Blake was able to cheat with her hair pick and pick up a win over Zarya. Of course, Saruka felt terrible. That was not her intention. And to avoid any further damage between the two best friends, Saruka offered up her spot to Zarya in the number one contenders battle royal later that night, to which Zarya was very appreciative, and she took it. Zarya was going to be in that battle royal instead of Saruka, who already has the speed championship and the North American championship to care about. Where did that end up going? During the matchup, Zarya was having herself a lovely time. She was up on the top rope, and Blake Monroe came out and attacked Saruka. And on a beaten Saruka, it was Zarya that obviously let the power friendship take over. And I don't understand why she couldn't have just rolled under the bottom rope or jumped through the middle rope to go check on her friend, but she jumped off the top rope out of the ring, therefore eliminating herself from the battle royal to go check in on her beaten friend, which I'm sure will be a point of talking in their future should they continue to diverge paths and grow further away from one another. Zarya will say, "You got attacked and you cost me my championship opportunity at Halloween Havoc," where it was actually Saruka's opportunity, and she'll bring that up. I gave you that opportunity, yada, yada, yada. You already know how this feud goes, but Zarya eliminated herself from the Battle Royal to check in on her injured and hurt friend. And I might as well mention now, we are getting at Halloween Havoc Saruka against Blake Monroe for the North American Championship. Blake Monroe's first title match as a member of the WWE roster. And Saruka's, I don't know what number, buddy. She has plenty of defenses and another defense in her wonderful North American Championship reign ever since winning it at Stand and Deliver in April. She's had it for a long time. I didn't realize she's had it for 6 months. I think it's been 6 months. She's had that title for an extremely long time. She's had herself a wonderful run. If nobody's complaining about your title reign 6 months in, you're doing yourselves a lovely job. Speaking of Saruka Speed Championship, they were kind of slow with it, but now they finally decided to speed it up. See what I did there? The Men's Speed Championship tournament, of course, the current speed champion is El Grande Americano. We haven't heard about it in all of his appearances on the main roster since he won it, essentially. But El Grande Americano is currently your speed champion. And finally, that championship will pick up some steam. Next week on NXT, tonight, we'll begin a 4-man tournament to determine the following challenger for El Grande Americano. That being Axiom of SmackDown, going against Evolve Sean Legacy, who we've seen on NXT a few months back. Both phenomenal wrestlers. They're going to have a very fun 3 minutes or so. You also get Zachary Wentz of the Rascals from TNA, and he'll go against Jasper Troy of NXT. Very interested to see how Jasper Troy works in a 3-minute setting, being as big of a tank that he is, and Zachary Wentz being a wrestler of TNA. I don't necessarily think he's going to pick up the win, but Jasper Troy and Zachary Wentz will probably have another fun 3-minute matches. I will say I wasn't initially a fan of WWE Speed. I didn't go on Twitter to watch. I don't even own Twitter anymore, so I didn't go on and watch those matches. But I like the idea of bringing it to NXT and making it its own separate championship. I think they've done a really good job so far. And in a 3-minute match, it's very action-packed. It'll get your attention. And for a guy like me whose attention span is not necessarily the greatest, it is a good championship. It's a good match. It's a good belt. I like it. Winner of this entire tournament will go on to face El Grande Americano. And the first 2 matches, as I mentioned, Axiom versus Sean Legacy and Zachary Wentz versus Jasper Troy, will take place on NXT tonight on the CW network. Not sure if I'll be watching. I have a lot of work to take care of on my own personal level. And of course, I say, of course, for Halloween, because who better to challenge for your main championship than quite possibly your spookiest character on the show, always has been, always will be, and Tatum Paxley. Of course, I'm talking about Tatum Paxley ended up outlasting the field to win the Battle Royal and claim the number 1 contendership for the NXT Women's Championship at Halloween Havoc. Of course, like if you look in retrospect, it's just so obvious that one who's considered your spookiest, your scariest, your weirdest character is going to challenge for that title at your Halloween pay-per-view. Of course. Why would it be any different? And of course, we've seen Lyra Valkyria make rounds on NXT in the last few weeks. She celebrated with her in the ring afterwards, and that was much to the dismay of the Callings' Izzy Dame, who, of course, had in her mind that she was going to win the match and that Tatum was there to protect her and help her win that match. It was ultimately Tatum that pulled the rope down on her and I guess indirectly eliminated her from the Battle Royal to win. So there will be, I'm sure, some tension within that faction going forward. Although Izzy Dame claims to be happy for Tatum, I'm sure she's not. And that will probably lead to something between those two in their future because Tatum, of course, thinks that Izzy Dame is her best friend and she'll be on her side no matter what. But Izzy Dame is obviously just in it for herself, and everybody knows that. That was the end of last week's edition of NXT. And I figured I'd put it in here now. Usually we like to do predictions at the end of the show, but then it's kind of out of order. So, Halloween Havoc, what matches do we have? First, you have Ricky Saints versus Trick Williams for the NXT Championship. I believe that Ricky Saints will retain. He just started his championship reign. He hasn't even defended the title yet. Trick Williams, of course, is a good name to get your first defense against. And I believe that there is a 115% chance that Ricky Saints defeats Trick Williams in what will likely be the main event of the show to retain the NXT Championship. Next, Ethan Page versus El Hijo de Dr. Wagner Jr. in the NXT North American Championship match, the Day of the Dead match. I believe it'll be a fun contest. You'll have some crazy spots, of course. They're both very good wrestlers, but ultimately, Ethan Page, as I alluded to before, will probably remain the greatest North American to ever live, to ever grace the company WWE. He'll continue a lovely North American Championship reign. As I've said every week on this show, Ethan Page has done a great job with that championship since taking it off of Ricky Saints. And I believe that his reign will continue on over the weekend at Halloween Havoc as he defeats the AAA Latin American champion, El Hijo de Dr. Wagner Jr. The Hardy Boys are making their first defense of the NXT Tag Team Championship since winning them against Dark State. They will be defending the NXT Tag Team Championships against Dark State again in a rematch this Saturday. Of course, the general fan base and myself included would like them to keep those tag team championships on the Hardy Boys. The more Hardy Boys in WWE, the better. Those both guys can still go and put on great shows and great matches. They still connect with the crowds as good as they ever have. But I don't think that is necessarily the route that the WWE and Shawn Michaels will take. I think that the Hardy Boys winning at Bound for Glory was to retain the TNA championships and obviously add some more trophies to their trophy shelf, their trophy case being the NXT North American, I'm all over the place, being the NXT Tag Team Championships. I believe that was done just to kind of get that on them. It was the one tag team championship that has eluded them their entire careers. And now I think Dark State is going to pick up a win, a signature win over the Hardy Boys, and get back the NXT Tag Team Championships going into next week's edition of NXT. The NXT Women's Championship match for Halloween Havoc, as I said, will be JC Jane against Tatum Paxley. A lot of people are actually on board with giving this championship to Tatum Paxley, which if it happens, I'm not opposed. But if we're picking rationally here, the Fatal Influence faction just added Lainey Reed. They lost Jasmine Nix. They added Lainey Reed. I don't think that JC Jane in her first title defense with Lainey Reed as an official member will let that numbers game fail. I believe that, although you might actually see some interaction between maybe Lyra Valkyria if she's back, you could see the calling get interfere with Fatal Influence to try and help Tatum Paxley come out victorious. But in the end, I think JC Jane is going to pick up another title defense and retain the NXT Women's Championship and continue a reign that's been far greater than the expectation was coming into it, we will say. And the last match to be added was Sol Ruca, the North American champion, against Blake Monroe, who's the NXT, that is for the NXT Women's North American Championship. Blake Monroe's first crack at gold as a member of NXT, and I believe that, like Melo, she won't miss. I think Blake Monroe is going to end up dethroning Sol Ruca and ending her phenomenal North American Championship reign. Not without shenanigans, of course. I'm sure she'll try to cheat. She'll probably win by cheating. She could possibly win by misfire if Zarya and Sol Ruca do something stupid, because their championship match with Charlotte Flair and Alexa Bliss has already taken place on SmackDown this past Friday. So I believe that something will go wrong and Blake Monroe will end up walking out with her first championship as a member of NXT, that being the NXT North American Championship. We know WWE loves these 5-match formats on PLE cards. Give everybody their due time, get the advertisements in. Will there be one more match? I'm not exactly sure. I'm sure there's a few ways they can go with that. Off the top of my head, I don't know if you can plan a match tonight that will happen over the weekend. It's happened in the past, but I think they're going to stick with this 5-match format. And as a quick rundown before we get into main roster shenanigans, I believe Ricky Saints will end up your North American or your NXT champion. After Saturday, he'll retain. I also believe Ethan Page will retain his North American championship against El Hijo de Dr. Wagner Jr. I believe you'll see 2 title changes in the form of Dark State recapturing the NXT Tag Team Championships and Blake Monroe capturing the NXT Women's North American Championship. And the NXT Women's Champion, JC Jane, will pick up another defense over Tatum Paxley and retain her championship and continue her reign on the NXT Women's division. The best division in women's wrestling, as they say. That concludes this week's NXT shenanigans, and it's time to jump into some main roster stuff. On the main roster, SmackDown. Friday Night SmackDown. Wonderful addition. A lot happened. First of all, Melo didn't miss, and neither did Triple H. That's what I say because, of course, Melo went out to shoot his shot at another U.S. title match against Sami Zayn a few weeks back. The Miz came out, attacked him from behind, and stopped that from happening. This week, The Miz came out to call his shot at Sami Zayn's U.S. Open Challenge, and it was Melo that attacked Miz from behind and ran him off the stage. So Melo did not miss, and of course I say neither did Triple H, because the biggest thing to happen outside, of course, of the Jacob Fatu injury on Friday Night SmackDown, Ilya Dragunov, a name that's been mentioned several times on this show ever since January when I started it. Ilya Dragunov has been out with a knee injury since last year. He only got a couple of months run on the main roster before getting injured. They've said he was ready for a while. He was kind of sharpening the tools, and it was the creative team that was waiting for the perfect moment to drop him back into the mix. They did it this past Friday on SmackDown. Ilya Dragunov made his grand return to WWE, answering the Open Challenge, one of the best wrestlers in the company, in the world, going head-on-head with Sami Zayn, which was going to be a phenomenal match. It ended up being a phenomenal match, and Triple H did not miss because Ilya Dragunov dethroned Sami Zayn, of course, off a solo distraction, which didn't really have any implications on the match. It seemed like it would, but I'm glad that Sami rebounded and hit an exploder on Ilya into the corner so that the win wasn't tarnished in a way. But Ilya Dragunov dethroned Sami Zayn to become the new United States champion. That is Ilya's first title on the main roster. Of course, he was a former NXT champion and NXT UK champion. We know Ilya Dragunov can carry a title and have fun, phenomenal reigns with them. And I'm sure this United States Championship reign will be no different. If Ilya wants to take the route of being a normal champion where you get into feuds and have those matches, that's fine. Ilya is a face character himself. He loves competition. He loves wrestling. So if you want Ilya to continue this Open Challenge format and just welcome more people into the ring with him, by all means do it, because the more Ilya Dragunov I get to see in the ring, the better. But Ilya Dragunov knows how to carry a championship, and barring the booking, which has supposedly this creative team has taken an overhaul and they've booked some really good SmackDowns recently, assuming they don't mess this up, we are in for another phenomenal U.S. title run, this time by Ilya Dragunov. And we have to give our respects, no matter what you think about him, to Sami Zayn. He took the United States Championship off solo. That was a bit of a questionable decision, in my opinion, but the route they took was perfect. He took the Open Challenge from John Cena. He had himself very good matches throughout this month-and-a-half long reign that he's had, and it eventually came to an end at the hands of an equally as good, if not better, wrestler in Ilya Dragunov and a younger talent. Supposedly, Sami Zayn actually made that call himself to put the title on Ilya Dragunov, which, if it is fair play to realize that potential and talent, but all this Sammy Hogan narrative can be put to rest if he's the one making that call. Sami Zayn get a round of applause from me. That was a wonderful championship reign. Triple H, you get a round of applause for me for pulling the trigger on Ilya Dragunov. And Ilya, of course, you get a round of applause for me for coming back, having a phenomenal match, winning your first championship on the main roster. And inevitably, you're going to have a good run with it. If they fumble this run, I will be very, number one, surprised and very disappointed. But all good things must come to an end. The MFTs, as we alluded to before, Solo Sikoa, they ran wild this episode, of course. Earlier in the show, they jumped Ray Phoenix backstage while he was getting some pictures taken. After the matchup with Ilya and Sammy, they jumped in the ring, jumped Ilya and Sammy and Ray Phoenix again, unfortunately for him. He came out to try and defend them, and they jumped him too, following that United States Championship match. And they end up in another face-off with the Wyatt Six, which I don't really know. Where are they going with that story? You have Solo Sikoa, you have Tangaloa, you have Talotonga, you have Tamatonga, you have, who am I forgetting? Why am I forgetting somebody? You have JC Mateo. That's 5. That's obviously good enough for a War Games team. Then you have the Wyatt Six, who have Uncle Howdy. They have Eric Rowan. They have Joe Gacy. They have Dexter Loomis, but they have Nikki Cross. So would you want to put them in a War Games cage? You can't have 5-on-5 if one's a, I mean, you can, but they haven't done that in a very long time. How exactly are they going to book this feud? I don't know. Will they run this feud for the tag team championships? Probably. Which two guys are going to defend? Which two guys are going to challenge Joe Gacy and Dexter Loomis for those tag team championships? We shall see. I don't really know, but I'm very intrigued. Like I said, it was the Freak Off Part 2. No Diddy. I said that last week. I'll say it again this week. But that is kind of what it is. They're just having a freak off. They're all weird. They're all weird characters. They're all doing weird stuff in the middle of the ring, just staring each other down, playing eye tag. I don't know what's going on with them, but I am intrigued nonetheless. And while we're on the topic, the tag team division has begun ramping up again on SmackDown. That was one of the staples of the show earlier in the year. It was a staple of the show leading into SummerSlam, where they had that big, phenomenal, fun TLC match that they put on at MetLife Stadium. And it kind of died out for a little bit. Although the Wyatts have had their run with the tag team championships, it's not their fault. They defended against the Street Profits, but the tag team division as a whole has not been nearly what it was before SummerSlam. And last week, it kind of picked back up in a way. You saw DIY return backstage against Fraxium to pick a fight with them. They went back and forth. I'm sure they're going to wrestle next week. Axiom stormed off, not very happy with the things that DIY, that being Johnny Gargano, Tommaso Ciampa, and now Candice LeRae, had to say about he and Nathan Frazier. You also saw the Motor City Machine Guns, who I guess haven't been around in a while. They defeated Los Garza in a celebration for their 1-year anniversary since bursting on the scene in WWE and winning the WWE Tag Team Championships within a matter of weeks. I don't think it was even a month before they got that shot against the MFTs, who were at the time the Bloodline last year, and picked up those titles. But it was a match where it just made me think, and I had to put it in here to make sure I didn't forget about it. Foreign crowds reign supreme over the United States one. That match between Motor City Machine Guns, one of the best, most accomplished, greatest tag teams of all time in the world of professional wrestling, against Los Garza, who are also a phenomenal tag team, former AAA tag team champions in their own right. They put on a really good, fun match. It was technical. It was beautiful. It was art. Wrestling is art. That match was art. And the crowd just does nothing. The crowd is not invested at all. Whereas if you go back a week to Australia, or you go back to some former crowds in like France, for example, one of the best examples, they're invested in every match. They're making noise. They're having fun. And the crowds here just don't do that. The crowds here just do not do that. I believe the show was in Orlando. Shame on Orlando, because that match was really fun. You guys made it sound as dead as it could possibly be for two of the best in-ring tag teams in the business, and one of the best tag teams, most accomplished, most known of all time in the world of professional wrestling. The crowds need to pick it up. They need to show some life, especially in the United States, because foreign crowds will forever reign supreme if they do not, for a match that was as good as Motor City Machine Guns versus Los Garza. On the other tag team front, as I mentioned before, there was a tag team defense in the women's division. That was Charlotte Flair and Alexa Bliss. They defended against Zarya and Soruka, who go by the name of Soruka. They finally had their long-awaited tag team match, and it was the champions Flair and Bliss that ended up retaining those championships. There was a Blake Monroe distraction. She was sitting ringside. She got into it with Soruka. As we mentioned, they're facing each other at Halloween Havoc for Soruka's North American Championship. So that little distraction allowed Charlotte Flair to target the leg of Soruka, brought her into the ring, hit the figure four, bridged it into the figure eight, forced Soruka to tap out. Kept Zarya looking strong, which is fine. Soruka can afford to lose a matchup on her own accord via pinfall, submission, whatever it may be. She can afford it. Zarya, you don't want to make it look like the weak link, especially if there's eventually going to be a feud between Soruka and Zarya. So I'm fine with the decision. And that's one of the little things that I love about professional wrestling is when they target a body part, they target it, and that's the reason that they win. Charlotte Flair targeted the leg. She hurt the leg. She ended up bridging that leg into a figure four, obviously a submission that attacks the legs, and Soruka was forced to tap out. I don't think it made her look weak. I don't think it made her look bad. I think she's in just fine shape ahead of her matchup with Blake Monroe at Halloween Havoc. But that's just one of the little intricate things I love about professional wrestling. And I feel like it's lost a lot nowadays, where you just target a body part and you just make the match logical and make it make sense. There is more of that on Monday Night Raw that I'll get to eventually, but good match, right winner. I don't think Zarya and Soruka should have won those tag team championships just yet if they're going to remain as a tag team, but right winner. Alexa Bliss and Charlotte Flair are doing wonderful work with those tag team championships and featuring them on the show on a regular basis. You finally got that promo from Aleister Black and Zelina Vega, who are now officially aligned. They confirmed this in their video package on Friday. They said this was always the plan. They were always going to work together and that they are a necessary evil on the show. Sure, Damian Priest is not going to be happy about this, and I'm sure that something is likely going to continue between the two of them. Tiffany Stratton was backstage and responded to her loss to Stephanie at Crown Jewel. Of course, she said it was no big deal. She's going to keep moving forward. Stephanie's a great champion. She got her on that Saturday. But Kiana James popped up and essentially just rage baited Tiffany Stratton into a matchup next week. She was kind of just throwing shots at her saying, this is why I went to Stephanie and not you. You're somebody that I'd never, ever think of representing. I only represent the top like Julia, and you're just not worthy of my time. And pretty much rage baited her into a match next week. Not a championship match, of course, but Kiana James, somebody who's kind of the representation for Julia, not really in big spots herself, got herself a match against the Women's World Champion, which I'm sure she's not going to win. Maybe we're leading into something champion versus champion with Tiffany and Julia. That match would be great. Both of them are great, but I kind of want championships to exist separately outside of Crown Jewel, especially if Crown Jewel's entire moniker is that it's champion versus champion. I think we should, outside of that show, have champions exist separately, focusing on defending their own gold and not running up how many belts they have. So Tiffany Stratton versus Kiana James will happen this Friday on SmackDown. Now, as for how did the WWE go about writing off Jacob Fatu from programming, they went as far as to make an impromptu WWE Championship match on Friday night. Nick Aldis started the show off by announcing Jacob Fatu versus Drew McIntyre as a number one contenders match for the WWE Championship. Winner would go on to face Cody Rhodes for the title at Saturday night's main event on November 1st. Then Jacob Fatu was brutally attacked backstage. He lost his teeth. He was all bloodied up. His teeth were on the floor. And of course, we said he has some dental issues, so it's a perfect way to write him off the show. And obviously, with that happening, Jacob was not to compete tonight. He was officially written off for his injury, for his recovery, however long it may be. Drew McIntyre came out and denied any involvement in that attack. And of course, Cody Rhodes came out irate, pointed the finger at Drew, and challenged him to a title match on the spot. Mind you, Cody's not in gear. Cody was in a suit. Cody was in dress clothes. And he and Drew McIntyre went on to have a fun little 10-minute main event for the championship. And Cody ended up getting DQ'd. He got thrown into the timekeeper's area, took his championship, and whacked Drew McIntyre with it. They brawled off to end the show, and Cody Rhodes stood tall. Now, that ending to SmackDown, writing off of Jacob Fatu, the attacker is unknown. That's why Nick Aldis came out and accused Drew McIntyre, who declined any involvement in it. Cody Rhodes came out, pointed the finger at Drew McIntyre, and for that reason got into the championship match with him immediately because Drew McIntyre already wanted to be called the number one contender for what happened. This has sparked some conversation online and some theories. who could have possibly attacked Jacob Fatu and laid him out backstage. I've heard 4 or so theories about it. One of them being the MFTs. Obviously, Solo Sikoa has issues with Jacob Fatu. That would make sense for them to go after him, cost him his big opportunity, lay him out, send him out for a while. That's an easy route, and that's kind of the least exciting route. Of course, Drew McIntyre can be proven false. It can be proven that Drew McIntyre did actually do the attack, lay out Jacob Fatu before the match in order to make him not compete and claim himself the number 1 contendership. Jacob comes back, attacks Drew McIntyre. That feud continues itself. That's another easy route. That's a little more exciting than the MFTs, but it's very predictable. And like we say on this show, predictable sometimes is good. I think that matchup and that feud will be fun if it happens, if that's the route they take. But we can get a little weird on this show. We can get a little bit out of the box. What's exactly going on backstage? One theory I've heard thrown around that I would be open to is Cody Rhodes, the one to carry out the championship. The champion is Cody Rhodes, the one to carry out the heinous attack on Jacob Fatu in the backstage area. Obviously, a lot of people have wanted Cody Rhodes to lean into that Homelander looking character that he has for a long time now, and he's showed glimpses of it, and it makes people think that eventually he's going to turn heel. How would he go about turning heel? I don't know. But if he's the one to lay out Jacob Fatu and it gets proven that way, obviously Cody Rhodes is now heel. Cody Rhodes attacked a babyface. Cody Rhodes did this heinous thing. Why would he do it? They'd have to do a really good job of justifying why he does it. You've seen Cody Rhodes and Jacob interact backstage a little bit, and Cody kind of just like gives him a smug little answer and moves it forward. I don't know if there's any real substance to this as to Cody Rhodes attacking him. Why would he be the one to attack him? I don't exactly know, but it would be a nice plot twist and a good way to finally turn Cody Rhodes heel and make him a heel champion, which is what I think a lot of people feel would give his character more depth and make his reign more exciting. So it could be Cody Rhodes. I don't know. And the last theory that I think would be, again, they'd have to find a way to defend it, but I think a really fun route to take would be, what if Randy Orton was the one that attacked Jacob Fatu, laid him out, and cost him the championship opportunity? Why would he do that? What does Jacob Fatu and what does Randy Orton have against Jacob Fatu? Why would Randy Orton do this to get Drew McIntyre the supposed number 1 contendership for the title? Why would Randy Orton just attack him in general? What motivation does he have? Is Randy Orton finally going crazy, tapping back into that old heel 2009 Randy Orton to chase after Cody Rhodes and steal the championship for his 14th or 15th, whatever number it would be, championship in WWE? I think it would be his 15th. You could go that route, and the theory lies upon Jacob Fatu was beat badly. He was bleeding from the mouth. His teeth were out on the floor. Who is more known for doing that to an opponent in their career, in the history of WWE? Who is more known for doing that than Randy Orton with the punt kick? He's teased it a few times. He wanted to punt kick Kevin Owens before WrestleMania, before Kevin Owens tragically hurt himself and needed surgery on his shoulder. He wanted to do it against John Cena in their match at Backlash in St. Louis. He almost did it before R-Truth jumped in and stopped him from doing it. He's teased this punt kick so many times. I think he teased it against Drew McIntyre as well. But why would he do it? That's the only question they'd have to answer. But I think it would be very good if Randy starts to crash out again and Randy Orton is the one that ultimately is starting to just go through everyone and everything to make what he wants his, which is that 15th World Championship. I think it would be a good feud. It's the feud that Cody Rhodes needs to have before his title runs are over, before his time in WWE or Randy's is over. They need to run a face versus heel feud of Randy Orton versus Cody Rhodes for a world championship. It is the top feud that Cody Rhodes can run on WWE as world champion outside of like a CM Punk. Cody Rhodes, CM Punk, Cody Rhodes, Randy Orton. That's the height of it right now. We've already seen Cody Rhodes versus Roman Reigns, not with Cody as champion, but we've already seen those feuds. And I think that as high can get for those two, for that championship run right now, is CM Punk or Randy Orton. Both of them would be extremely good title feuds. So we'll see which way they go when Jacob comes back. Who does he attack? Who does he think did it? Yada, yada, yada. We'll see. But running low on time, we only got 10 minutes left. And we finally made it to Monday Night Raw, which was last night, which I thought was an excellent edition of Monday Night Raw. Not going in chronological order here. We like to keep everything structured. We're going to focus now on the World Championship. Uh, Seth Rollins was stripped of the championship. I mentioned that earlier. He's going to be out for a while due to a shoulder injury. He was stripped of the World Heavyweight Championship, forced to vacate. That belt is now vacant, and we will have a new champion again at Saturday night's main event when CM Punk takes on the winner of a battle royal that was announced for later last night. Of course, Braun Breaker came about carrying the championship, forced Adam Pearce to say please and essentially beg him for it back. And before that segment was over, Paul Heyman said that his WrestleMania actions were never for Seth Rollins, but it was for Bronson and Braun instead. He was using Seth Rollins. That's kind of the promo that he cut. And he called Seth a bum shoulder B word, which I can't say on this radio station, but he called him a bum shoulder. He said that it was never for Seth. It was always for the Brawns and their future of WWE. Of course, because why else would they turn on Seth so fast? So that is the state of the World Championship leading into later last night. Last night had a lot to do. It revolved a lot around the Judgment Day. And as I wrote in my notes here, last night was Judgment Day for the Judgment Day. Everything was on the line for that faction going into last night's Monday Night Raw. JD McDonough and Finn Balor were very upset with Dominic for kind of indirectly booking their title match against AJ Styles and Dragon Lee. And Dom kind of throwed some shots at them, talking about complaining about handling AJ Styles when he already did it twice. So there's a little bit of friction there. There's always been friction in the Judgment Day as long as it's existed. But you're starting to see Dominic kind of doubt them and kind of branch off to be his own guy. He's the double champion. He has the Intercontinental Championship. He has the AAA Mega Championship. So there's a little bit brewing within the Judgment Day. And after they stormed off and promised Dominic no help tonight against Rusev, Roxanne, of course, came over to comfort Dom. And I hate to be that guy, but if they're going to keep going with these Dominic and romance angles, does this finally set up for a Liv Morgan return? Is Liv Morgan's return imminent to the company, which would be a huge get back for WWE? She's been gone since June or July. I forget which month officially it was. But Liv Morgan's been out for a very long time, and getting her back in the mix of things, if she's ready to, would be very fun. And I think if there's ever a way to do it, it would be between her and Roxanne over Dominic, if that's the way they want to go. So every time that Roxanne comforts every time she comforts Dominic, I think you're going to be hearing me talk about it. As long as I'm in here, as long as I'm talking about wrestling, that's the most obvious way to bring Liv Morgan back. And every time they interact, I'm going to be leaning like, "Ooh, is Liv Morgan's return imminent? Is she going to come back soon?" We shall see. The Judgment Day had a right to be upset about Dominic's booking of the title match because we saw a title change on Raw last night. AJ Styles and Dragon Lee dethroned the Judgment Day to become new World Tag Team Champions. The Reign of Terror Part 2 is over. It has been over 150 days. I don't know the exact number, but again, just one title defense for the Judgment Day. And it was very early on in the reign. I believe it was against the LWO, if I'm not mistaken. They've featured the championships. You see them around. They're carrying them, but they're not defending them. They're not doing anything in the tag division on Raw again, which has been one of its major bad booking points. AJ Styles and Dragon Lee come together as a tag team. I don't even remember how it happened. I think it was by chance. They work extremely well together, and they are now the new World Tag Team Champions on Mondays. They're going to have a fun reign. AJ Styles is a figure that's featured on Raw every week. Every single week. So, and Dragon Lee is one of the best wrestlers in the world in the company. He's amazing. So I'm sure they're going to actually defend the championships as faces, and they're going to put on some really fun defenses. That was Dragon Lee's first main roster championship win. He's claimed the Speed Championship and the North American Championship on NXT previously, but this is his first main roster championship. And for AJ Styles, he's back on top again. This time, his second tag team championship win in WWE. And I have to say thank you. I have to say thank you very fast, because earlier this week, with what's gone on in the world of the NFL, in the world of the New York Giants, with their horrendous choke job against the Denver Broncos on Sunday. This is not a football show. But with that happening and our kicker being Jude McAtomney, who's from Ireland, missing multiple extra points, it's nice to see a little bit of get back and see some Irishmen lose their World Tag Team Championships on Monday night. So thank you, WWE, for booking that. I very much appreciate it as a New York Giant fan. It's still just me, Oos. Jimmy believes that Roman is wrong about Jay and that Jay actually lost his championship because he stopped believing in himself. But of course, Jay believed that he and Roman uh, were also right, that Jay should start focusing on himself and stop helping out others. But the brothers ended that segment confirming they're on good terms and that they're going for everybody in the Battle Royal tonight, as they were both in it. The hometown hero, Maxine Dupree in Sacramento, was denied of her Intercontinental Championship. She put up an extremely impressive and valiant effort, but ultimately she did not leave as the Intercontinental Champion. She did end as the victor of the match, but it was because Becky Lynch used the championship belt to hit Maxine Dupree and get herself disqualified. And Becky laid out Maxine to end the match. So I'm sure that feud is going to continue in some sort. Maxine Dupree now actually has 2 wins over Becky Lynch, one by countout, one by DQ. I don't know if she'll ever get one by pinfall, but Maxine Dupree is on a steady rise to the top, I guess. She's improved week by week. She's improved drastically in the last 2 years that I've been watching her. And it seems like she's in a legitimate title feud with Becky Lynch now, which is nice to see. She's done herself some wonderful work. Rhea, as I mentioned, got injured. She broke her nose in Japan. And of course, the Kabuki Warriors took credit for it. They took credit for putting down both Rhea and Io. They took credit for breaking Rhea's nose. Asuka gave Kairi some praise for showing how ruthless she can finally be. And they have their eyes set for the future on Tag Team Gold, which nobody's going to complain if the Kabuki Warriors, who are a wonderful tag team, are back in the title picture. Will they win them? I don't know. I have no idea what's going to happen in the women's tag team division, but them getting back into a title picture is appropriate, I would say, to say the least. The Vision, of course, now being Heyman and the Browns only, no Seth Rollins. The Vision went half blind last night because Bronson Reed and Braun Breaker they were out of the Battle Royal. They were no longer in the Battle Royal for the number 1 contendership for the World Heavyweight Championship at Saturday night's main event. Of course, Adam Pearce got back at Heyman, told him, say please. He said please. He still gave him a no, slammed the door in his face. And Becky Lynch and Paul Heyman had to square off outside that office, where Becky Lynch heard from Paul Heyman. He pleaded with her that he had no choice and she could still roll with him in the Vision. But Becky says she never liked or trusted him, and neither did Seth. Seth was surprised that it took so long for him to turn on them, and she said that Seth will be seeking vengeance, not on him, but on anybody he rides the coattails of when he comes back. He's going to be having Paul Heyman wishing that Seth just killed him instead. And then there was a nice moment where Paul Heyman kind of reminded the Browns of all his success. They were kind of worried about getting taken out, and he reminded them of 2002 Lesnar, of 2012-13 CM Punk, and of course, the tribal chief Roman Reigns, all his successes that he's had. It gave them some reassurance that these things will take time. There was a match, the workhorse versus the wind horse, as I put it. The workhorse of WWE this year, Roxanne Perez, who had her 41st televised match since the calendar turned, faced the winningest superstar in the business, that being Stephanie Vaquer, who's won 25 matches on TV since the turn of the year. Stephanie Vaquer picked up her 26th win of the year against Roxanne Perez, I believe her 2nd of the year. And after the match, Nikki Bella returned, helped her fight off the 2 Judgment Day foes, and she'll be taking up Stephanie Vaquer after the future. She'll be taking up Stephanie Vaquer on future offers. We're kind of out of time here. Really quickly, I'll run through. Bayley has a surprise for Lyra next week. She's obviously very worried because Bayley's kind of gone haywire. And as for the World Heavyweight Championship Battle Royal, Sheamus returned in it. That was one really good thing that happened last night. I was happy. A lot of storylines were developed throughout the match, but in the end, it was Jey Uso that ended up winning the match. He tossed his own brother, Jimmy Uso, out after Jimmy helped him stay in. And, of course, tossed Dominic out, who somehow managed to stay until the end to win the number 1 contendership. Jey Uso and CM Punk faced off to close the show. They'll be facing on November 1st at Saturday night's main event to crown a new world heavyweight champion. And of course, Jimmy stared on in anger after all that happened because he saved Jey and Jey didn't save him. So there's going to be some tension going forward between the Usos. Their tag team reunion is not going to last very long. That's it for me today. If you want to see more of me, tune in at 5 o'clock. I'll be hosting On Antics with Luca and we'll be going over this past weekend in UFC. If you want to see more wrestling, tune in next week, 1 p.m. Tuesday. And that's all I got. See you guys next week. Thank you for listening.